Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining, everybody. One of the questions I get throughout the year is how much do I spend on whiskey, either as a part of maintaining this channel or just being a part of this hobby overall? How much do I spend? How much do I spend month to month on average? Those are questions that I avoid and act ignorant about, especially when my wife asks them. A lot of the times when the cashier will ask me if I need a receipt, I say, please chop that thing up immediately. Do not put it in the bag. Do not leave behind any physical evidence of what I have just done in the store. Unfortunately for me, I do keep copious amounts of spreadsheets behind the scenes at the channel. And one of them is our review system where every single bottle that I log a score for, I also log the price so that I can understand that value score in the end as well. So unfortunately for me, I can actually analyze all this data, do a month-to-month comparison, and see if I spent more money this year versus last year. So curious to see how much I spend? Then stick around and we'll go through it and also some of the lessons learned in 2024. So thank you for joining today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. Got a little pour in the glass as we go through this. This is actually the most expensive bottle that I purchased throughout the year. We will get into what that is and what that does to the numbers later on. So in general, though, the premise behind this goes back to a video that I did last year where I went over all of the spending in 2023. A few people said I was brave for putting the numbers out there and telling the truth. I mean, this is part of our hobby. We know what each other is spending, especially the deeper that we are into this. We flash up all these pictures on Facebook, on Instagram. Those things add up. Why not be truthful about it? Let other people know how much we do spend on this hobby. But then also, as part of the channel, the point is for us to tell you our opinions on bottles, and then maybe that helps you save money. So, we're being noble about this as well, being the first in on some of these bottles, right? We can always justify the prices and the costs, right? So let's get into the analysis here, and then we'll do a little bit of a retrospect on the year. So with this year in general, I know I talk about reviewing about 100 bottles in total in 2024. Some of those were media samples. Some of those were actual samples from other whiskey friends. So those wouldn't count in the list. The only thing that can count in the list are things that I personally bought, which goes to 71 bottles, 43 of which were bourbons, 17 were rye, 6 were Boo Ryes. That actually caught me off guard, that only 17 of the bottles were ryes. I actually felt like I was drinking rye just as often as I was drinking bourbon in 2024. I guess the ryes themselves just stood out, but in the end, I really didn't buy that many. I thought that was strange. So then clarifying what is in this list then, once again, it's got to be a bottle that I bought. Thus, if it was a gift or it was something that I bought and gave away as a gift, it can't be in the list. So this isn't going to be everything I spent on whiskey, but particularly what I spent on whiskey in regards to the channel. Another omission is going to be backup bottles. I didn't buy that many in 2024, probably the least amount of backup bottles that I've ever gone throughout a year. And the ones that I did buy were mostly either due to us picking it, and I wanted to have some backups for sentimental reasons, or it was something that I wanted to make sure we had enough ounces of when it comes to our crowning the best whiskey of the year with our blind tournament, which will probably take place in like January, February. So stick around for the lies on that one. And if I bought it and I happen to not review it, which is really not a thing, everything that crosses the threshold of my door gets opened and gets reviewed. I do really enjoy logging those scores and relaxing. So then getting into it then, we're going to show some numbers, and I'm going to be highly uncomfortable as I show these numbers and talk through them, but why not just be truthful about what we spend on this hobby? And getting into it then, what you can see is a slow start to the year in January at only $85, one bottle purchased. January is a very slow month, not a whole lot of new things coming out. But things did quickly ramp up when it came to February and March, where I spent on average around $600. So that would equate to about $125 a week. And those are spread across around 8 bottles a month. April took a step back only to make up for it in May. In May, some high-priced bottles came out, such as the Kelvin Collaboration Series from Foregate, which is a fourth of that budget. Then in June, came back down again towards that average. So one of the things that I did see, at least in that first half of the year, is kind of hitting that $500 to $600 on average number pretty consistently. And we can see how many bottles went into that. Also, a thing that sticks out too is that average price paid. So, dividing that $2,700 in the first half of the year divided by the 33, you're looking at about an $80 bottle or so. Something like that is the average price, which makes sense typically, at least for the things that I dabble in. And then the second half of the year looked like a whole lot like the first half of the year. So in July, only 4 bottles, but spent $446. That is where the most expensive bottle of the year comes into play. The headliner from New Riff. Now, this was a lottery bottle, so I had to enter a lottery for the right to be able to buy this. It did cost $250, though much of this did go to charity just to help me justify it. But what this was a blend of 10-year-old bourbon from New Riff, 9-year-old bourbon from New Riff, 9-year-old rye from New Riff, and 7-year single malt from New Riff, all blended together. So essentially commemorating their 10th anniversary with the oldest whiskeys in their stocks and blending them together for something fun. So there are about 600 some bottles of this. Glad to have it on the shelf, but was really expensive, and I did break my cardinal rule that I'll get to later for this particular bottle specifically. So cheers, everybody. I will say, this bottle has gotten better and better and better the longer it's sat on the shelf. Each month or so when I revisit this, it's improving. So happy about that part. So then when it came to the rest of the year, you can kind of see the numbers. Never really got to too much of a silly season, though November was the most extreme month of the year, spending almost $1,000 on whiskey across 12 different bottles. I can go over some of the ones here. Of course, if you follow the channel, you've seen all the reviews and you see the videos come out essentially every Monday. But things like K. Luke, Batch 10, an OKI 11-year bourbon. I've had a hard time resisting those old MGPs this year. That's a lot of those things on this list. Durrell managed to grab me a Weller Foolproof, which was great. Got the Elijah Craig Toasted Single Barrel, a Copper and Cast Cigar Blend. So you can kind of hear all these bottles that I'm throwing out there. Just unique things that I couldn't resist, and I way overspent. In the end there, for the second half of the year, spent more in the second half than the first half. That is a consistent trend that I saw versus last year as well. More things seem to come out the second half of the year, particularly when it comes to limited editions, one-time releases. Those things do tend to come out in that September to October, November timeframe. So November was my big spending month, but luckily I know I've got a little bit of time left here in December. I really don't plan on buying anything else, but only bought 2 bottles, spent $200 so far. So hopefully I can cap it at that, leave the numbers where they are, because where they are is 71 bottles for a total spend of $6,200. Now, if you add in all the backup bottles and things I didn't review or whatever, add 10% to that, something like that. Give me plus minus 10%, and then that's where the number lies. So curious to know, you don't have to tell me the exact number in the comments, but higher, lower, where do you sit? I know I'm probably on the high end. Part of it is maintaining this channel and going towards this hobby, but it is a lot to spend on whiskey. And I do reflect on that number quite a bit as well. I've got a very outdated kitchen. as an example upstairs and think about how if I wasn't in this hobby, maybe I could renovate that kitchen a little faster. Things like that add up. Also, you got to live, you got to have some fun. And this is like my main hobby these days. This is a whole lot of fun hanging out with whiskey friends. So then when it comes to the goal, I did have a resolution for 2024 to spend less in 2023. A lot of people doubted I could pull this off, by the way, calling me out at bottle shares and stuff like that across the year. Guess what? Totally did it. Spent $1,000 less on paper than I did in 2023. Now, the thing that was interesting, and I can take one step forward on that, is thinking about why I was able to spend less. I made it a resolution, so I was being more conscious about what I purchased throughout the year, trying to make the punches stick a bit more. Now, one thing that did help me, new brands throughout the year that are really bringing competitive prices. I mean, I got a lot of copper and cask. I mean, we've been talking about copper and cask for a while here, but their prices are really good. That cigar blend I was talking about earlier costs like $70 for a 7-year age-stated cigar blend, finished in all those Armagnac and Cognac and Port and Sherry. Come on, that's like a ridiculous price for something like that. Also had a lot of new riff releases throughout the year that range from $50 to $70, as long as you will ignore the fact that I spent $250 on this headliner. Other brands that continue to kind of keep those single barrel prices down. I mean, I got a lot of Middle West, Two Souls. I guess those are a little more expensive. Ben Holidays, Jack Daniel's single barrels, Echo single barrels, Old Dominic. I don't know, just a whole bunch of things that in the end just keep the prices fair. And that just helps me out. Also stopped buying overpriced limited editions. I think that was really the thing that helped me out. There were a lot of bottles and series that I just gave up on. They just priced me out. You know, I gave up on Booker's a few years ago for pricing me out of what I thought it was worth versus the price paid. I didn't buy the Yellowstone limited edition this year. You know, had it been $100, I would have gotten it, but I kept seeing it for $120, $130, $140. No, I'm not going to get into that for something that's 101 proof. And then the other one that I gave up on was Master's Keep. This was the first year that I didn't buy a US edition of the Master's Keep. And yeah, no regrets on that. What was it going for? Like $375, $275? Something ridiculous for a 10-year rye. I mean, if they'd have kept it at $175, I'd have kept playing. Now, I'm sure they don't miss my business. They probably sold them out anyway. But eventually, you got to play blackjack, and you got to know where to stand. And where the prices started going on some of these releases, I was done. And I showed that throughout the year. And anything over 100, I also highly scrutinized. It also caused me a bit of stress to go over 100. I know I went over 100 consistently maybe for K-Luke and Foregate. And what's another one that I went over 100 for? That 11-year MGP from OKI. So if you give me some high-aged MGP, maybe I can bend there. And then, you know, that's almost it. Oh, there was a Nashville Barrel Company. That was our pick. So I did spend $130 on that. And Bardstown Amroot. Okay, $160 on that one. But I tried to pick my punches as I'm looking through this list. Not too many of the bottles are triple digits. And that's a way to make the budget last a little longer. And the weird thing is, didn't miss it. Didn't miss having those high-priced whiskeys. And when it comes to the scoring system, on average, there was more higher scoring bottles this year than last year. So I spent less and I got better whiskey. That's a win-win. So keep an eye on your spending. Keep an eye on that. You can always cut back. You be you on what you do. But you can kind of see the results here. I was able to step back off the accelerator a little bit and save some room in this basement that is very flammable. So thank you for joining today, Whiskey Friends. Curious what you think of this topic, of the numbers, everything that was said. Once again, are you higher or lower than me? I had people call my numbers last year pedestrian, which, whew, man, people love their whiskey and people love their hobbies. And I'm glad it brings us enjoyment. But let us know what you think of all this, and we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye, whiskey friends.